we're going to talk about career pathing from an organizational perspective as well as from an individual perspective. And I'm going to be talking about, as an organization, how do you look at succession planning, supporting people in career development? And Eileen's going to be talking to you about, as individuals, how do you look at your own careers, and how should you be thinking about developing your careers as leaders within supply chain? And this topic, it's such a pleasure to be talking to you guys about this topic, because in supply chain, from everything I've read and heard and understand about supply chain, careers within supply chain are changing and moving. And now is the time to be really thinking about career paths and what does that mean from both an individual and an organizational perspective. We're brainstorming analogies for career paths in supply chain, and the best one that we came up with is, it seems that career paths in supply chain today are like moving water. So if you can imagine a river that moves, and there's a lot of volume, and you sort of know where the river is going to go. But over time, you get little streams that start moving to the side, and different opportunities that start branching out, and that need to be, in a career perspective, managed and taken advantage of. So I see career paths in supply chain like a fast moving body of water with little streams or tributaries going off to the side. And from an organizational perspective, you need to be aware of those and thinking of those and managing those little streams as they go off. And some of them are going to turn into big rivers, and you need to be planning for that. And as an individual, you need to be aware of where these little streams are going to be going off in different directions so that you can take advantage of those and prepare yourself for them. So that's the gist of what we're going to be talking about. I've left my clicker over here. Now we've been introduced. You do know a little bit about us from the great introduction. What I'd like to do, just before we jump into our presentation, is get a sense of who you guys are in the room. So can I ask you, and that'll help us gear our presentation to the lens that you're looking at career pathing through. So how many people in this room are people that are looking at career pathing from an organizational leader perspective? Okay, great. Then, so there's a fair number of folks. And then from a managerial perspective, looking at career planning from being the manager of your group and taking care of the career development for a relatively small group of people within your team. Okay, perfect. And then I'm not even going to ask about the looking at career pathing from an individual perspective, because no matter where you are in the organization, that's something that you should always be thinking about, is your own career path and where do you want to move in terms of career pathing. So you've learned about me and Eileen. So what we'd like to do now is move into an icebreaker discussion. So you guys have been listening to people talk for the last day and a half. So we wanted to give you the opportunity to talk to each other. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eileen.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me? Is this working? Okay, great. So questions we have for you, and just have a quick conversation at your table. How does your organization approach career development? Do you feel that your organization is thinking about where we're going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How are we going to manage the people that we have? Do we have to look outside? How do you think your organization looks at career development right now? And so how do you think about your own career? Are you thinking about moving on? Are you thinking about excelling in supply chain? You're thinking about taking a section of supply chain and making it a specialty? Do you think you're happy right where you are right now? How do you think about your own career? So can we just take, I don't know, about a minute and just kind of have a bit of a conversation, just get people's ideas going?
Well, maybe we'll give them more than a minute.
We'll give it 2 minutes, 2 minutes. You know, I work with people all the time one-on-one and helping them either make their current job work better for them, help them find new careers and new jobs. And the one thing I always say is you are responsible for your career. Your employer is not. Your employer can work with you. Your employer should be giving you opportunities, should be giving you mentoring, coaching, etc. But at the end of the day, it is your responsibility. And it's funny because I heard somebody around here say, I'm just going to wait and see what my employer has to offer. And we're going to get into that, but that's But that's actually not the way to do it, because it's not, you need to take control. Because if you don't take control of your own career, who's going to do that? Which brings us into our next slide. That's the whole slide, yes. So, so what we typically see in career development is employers look internally at the current jobs rather than envisioning what they need 5 years down the road. So they say, what do I need right now? As opposed to where do I need kind of going forward? Who's going to be retiring? Who's going to be moving on? Who might be taking a leave? Who might be taking a sabbatical? What do you need like later, not just right now? So it's kind of reversed. And then secondly, with employees, they look at jobs down the road as opposed to taking a look at what you have right now. Okay, so it's opposite. So where do you want to be, and what do you currently have? So taking stock into what's important right now in you, and what are those skills and those attributes that you want to move into that next role. And when you do that, you start with strategy. And I'll hand it over to Tanya.
Sure. So one of our key messages for, when I work with organizations and when Eileen works with individuals, it's you need to start with strategy. And they don't, right? It's just as Eileen was saying, organizations look at who's going to be retiring. What are those boxes, and who might be able to fill those boxes? And it might make sense, right? But from our perspective, and what we work with organizations to do is look not at what's the box, what's the job, but what are the skills that you're going to need, right? It's taking the great work, it's doing the sorts of things that have been done by some people in this room to say, what are we going to need 5 years down the road? What's our business strategy? What's our business environment? What's the business going to look like 5 years down the road? And then let's start thinking about what are the skills we're going to need to get there. And we don't even have to think about the boxes, because the boxes are going to change, right? We have these little streams going off in all sorts of different directions. You're always going to have a CEO and a CFO, but the skills required to be a successful CFO today may be very different from what's going to be required to be a successful CFO in a changing business environment. So it seems obvious to say your business needs need to drive your talent, career pathing, development thing. But a lot of the organizations that we work with don't. You described a very good program for young people to give them exposure to help them probably make the best decisions as they go forward. But very few organizations really think about their business needs, and then how do we build development, training, support for people to develop the skills that are going to be needed 5 years from now. And that's what we mean from an organizational perspective around start with strategy. Start with the business strategy and then plan for that. So here's an illustration. One of our, at Hay Group, I'll tell you a little bit about Hay Group. We're a big global management consulting firm. We've got 87 offices in 46 countries. We've got 2 really great research and development groups, one in Philadelphia, one in India. We have an India Knowledge Center, which is just fabulous. And they're constantly doing research and creating visuals for us. So this is an example of a visual that we share with organizations to just highlight the supply and demand. So look at what the demand's going to be in the future, not today. What's your current supply? So don't go back. Don't start looking at, if you're looking at VP level and creating a succession plan for VPs, don't look at directors. In some ways, it might be a little bit too late. We do, but from an organizational perspective, the best companies for leaders are looking at people as they enter their career. During that process, like at Coke, at Procter & Gamble, at the most admired companies, what they do is throughout a person's career, they're constantly looking at the skills that they have, the skills that they could use, what's their potential, and we'll talk about assessment in a second, but constantly, and then thinking about what they're going to need in the future. So there's just an illustrative example. So from an employee perspective, we think a little differently.
So at McRae, we have one office in one country, in one city. So all these fancy slides are over, okay? So from an employee perspective, imagine where you want to be. What does that look like in terms of skills and competencies? So when you're wrapping on a strategy of what your career is going to look like, and be mindful that things change as you go along, right? You might think it's a good idea now, and then it changes 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, circumstances happen. But what do you think what's that gonna look like in terms of skills? What kind of skills are you gonna need going forward, and what type of competencies, and what's the market asking for now? What are some of your competitors looking for now? Make sure you take real stock in that and to understand where that's all coming from. Think about where you are. So not just your title, because titles change. It's telling me about where are you in your role? What type of authority do you have? What kind of responsibilities do you have? And really take, a lot of it we don't even pay attention to, but we think about, okay, what am I responsible for? What kind of committees do I sit on? What kind of projects am I given? What type of projects do I assume I'm going to take on? And what kind of projects does my employer want to ask me about? So think about where you are now, and then also reflect how you got to where you are. So a lot of careers happen by accident. We just kind of start working, and then here we are, right? And think about how you got there. Like, did you aspire to be where you are? Did you just, apply to an ad, and here we are 10 years later? Or have you thought about it? Supply chain, this is what I really, really like doing. Do you like doing all of it? Do you like doing a part of it? Do you like being a specialist versus a generalist? Think about where you are right now and how you actually got here. And chart that down. That will also help develop your strategy of where you want to be. Once you do that, take a look at the talent internally and externally.
So from an organizational perspective, so from an individual perspective, and just to add, Eileen, as you go through that process that Eileen just talked about, that's how you're going to find the passion in every step and stage of the way, right? Is really, really understanding what it is that's gotten you to where you are and what you love doing, and then looking forward. So assess talent. So a big part of the work that I do, here I'll hop down, in Calgary today is around helping organizations assess talent and create succession planning paths. And when I talk to them about assessing talent for succession planning, for career development, we really highlight the importance of looking at a number of different variables when you're looking at the person. So on this slide, typically what organizations talk about when they talk about who's going to be ready for that next role, what's the next step in this person's career path, it's experience. Well, what have they done in the past? Which is important. It is an important part of looking at what the next steps are and where have they gotten experience and exposure. But it's not the only thing, because the path forward, if all that you're looking at experience and your talent pool both are very narrow if that's the only thing that you're looking at. So we highlight to the organizations that we work with, look at experience, education, those are sometimes the minimum qualifications. But look at past performance, because surprisingly enough, that's not always looked at, right? Has anybody ever been in an organization where past performance doesn't actually predict promotions? It's a little bit scary sometimes. And then look at aptitudes, because as was mentioned by this lady, the job that you're doing today probably requires certain skills and abilities. But every individual has more than just what's required of their job. So look broadly at what are their abilities, what are their aptitudes, and what's the job that you're looking at them for, because it may be an entirely different set. It may require an entirely different set of abilities. So don't let education and experience dictate who's going to move forward if it's a different set of abilities that you're looking for, right? It's the typical sort of, the best engineer gets promoted to be the manager of engineers. Well, manager of engineers is an entirely different skill set than engineering. So we have that conversation a lot. Look at the technical competencies, but also look at the behavioral competencies. And here again, we talk about, these are the softer skills, right? These are, if you're going to be a manager of people, what do you need beyond the technical that will really make you successful? And every organization is a little bit different. right? In some organizations, it's you need to be conscientious and rule following to be a successful leader. In others, you need to be flexible and adaptable to be successful as a leader. So look at the role, look at the environment, then look at the individual in all of these different ways. And then, you've got the clicker. And then we can create a bit of a dashboard for individuals around where do they fit relative to future roles, or even just in general. And you start to get a sense of who the individuals are that you may be thinking of promoting throughout your organization. I had, at one point, a slide in here, I must have taken it out, on an organizational dashboard. So where you can look at a particular team, a particular division, like you could, one thing that some organizations that we worked with have done is taken an area, like supply chain, and said, who do we have in terms of talent? If our business strategy is to move into different markets, if we're going to move into more global markets, we need to think about supply chain. So we're going to need different skills in supply chain. So who do we have in supply chain? And go through the assessment process and create a bit of a dashboard in terms of supply chain talent. And what does that look like? And who are the people that we can pull on in order to be the people that we need in the future? And the other piece that I want to highlight that's reflected in this slide is don't just assess for today. Don't just assess for current abilities, but also look at potential. Or the future role requirements, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Look at potential, not just what people are doing today. So potential equals, we've got a formula, person's current abilities along with the future role requirements, right? So we've sort of talked about that, what's going to be needed in the future, what are people good at today, plus growth factors and derailers. So, and those are just different frames of looking at some of the, at an individual. Growth factors, we say there's certain indicators of people that have the potential to grow and evolve into more roles. And I'm sure you've seen that in the people that you've worked with, other leaders that you've had. Some people struggle to be open and learn and internalize the learning that they have. And when we look at people with potential, that's one of the big things that we look at. And we also look at derailers. In the leadership literature today, there's an increasing amount of discussion around derailers. So somebody's great at doing lots of different things, but there's one thing, typically on the behavioral, competency, interpersonal skills stuff, that is such, that's a part of who they are, that just can be the thing that gets them off the rails, that can really derail. And when we work with folks around, with organizations around identifying who your future leaders are going to be, we want to identify those derailers in order to help the individual overcome them, or give them the opportunity to overcome those derailers. Because, you know, we've all seen those, you know, there's those leaders going along the track, they're great, and then boom, they blow up in a big fiery and career-ending move that finally gets them. And so we want to be able to identify those early and help them overcome them. From an employee perspective.
From an employee perspective, and this is picking up a bit on what Tanya just said. So part of what I also do is I go to job terminations. I'm there when people are let go from work, and I find out actually what's going on, and they say, well, the fit's not there. And I said, can you tell me more about that? Well, you know, this person was promoted to a manager role, and this person's a terrible manager. This happens all the time, okay? And you know, and this is, and it speaks to this slide, but also some of what Tanya was saying. We sometimes we believe we have to keep moving up, or else we're not ambitious, right? Sometimes we've actually, a lot of times we've reached a point where we're really good at what we do. How do I become the expert in this area? I don't want to be a manager. Managers are not for, being a manager is not for everybody. It comes with a huge amount of responsibility and doing a lot of work nobody wants to do, which is why they pay managers what they do. They have to make very tough decisions, and they have to deal with a lot of personnel issues, and the more people that report to you, the less of the work you actually get done yourself, and you make sure it gets done by other people, right? Does this resonate? And how many times have you seen in your workplace where people are promoted to a manager role and they shouldn't be promoted? They're just not good managers, right? And also, so as an employee, recognize where your strengths are. Not all of us are set out to be in that next sort of upper edge of an organization. We are really good with what we're doing now, or we want to move into another role, but we're not in that leadership management role. So, so that being said, so when you look at your talent, so where do you fit in within your current department and team? Are you fitting in with being that specialist that you are, or do you think you're going to fit in being a manager one day? And if so, what are the skills that you need and the competencies you need to make that happen? What level do you want to fit into? Be very careful how you assess this. Don't think just because I'm in this business for the last 8 years, now's the time to become a manager. Well, maybe the time is now to become a specialist. If people here are familiar with Myers-Briggs typology, so there's intuitive people and then there's sensory people. So the intuitive people are the ones that are the big picture thinkers. Those are the managers. And those are people really good at getting something done to 80%. It's like getting to third base and not getting to the home, right? But there's two, and then they're thinking about the next thing. The sensory people are detailed people. Those are the specialists out there. They're really good order takers. I'm an order taker. Tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. Right? And then just tell me what you want me to do after that and I'll do it. And I'll do it really, really well and I'll deliver on it and I'll make sure it's perfect and it's detailed, etc. These are two very different people. So when you have a lot of those intuitive people, those leaders, you have to have a lot of really good sensory people under them. And they actually make the vision happen. What do you have as far as your talent? Where is your talents? What is it that you have right now? What do you have to offer? What do you want to expand on? What is it that you want to become? There's a difference between what we like and what we're good at. So as I said, I used to work in communication and public affairs. I'm really good at it. I just don't want to do it anymore, right? But I'm good at it. But I want to do it. What is it? Try to get that happy medium is I'm really good at this, but I also really like it. Focus in on that. See where the common areas are. And try then to ditch what you don't like, but you might be good at it, but you don't actually like doing it. So focus in on the two that when you can marry the two together. And then finally, what is it you need? What are you missing? What type of, are you missing some education? Are you missing some skills? Are you missing some other type of exposure to a different department or a different line of business? Maybe, for example, you work in government, maybe you want to look into corporate, or you want to look into not-for-profit, or you want to just, what are you missing right now to round off that career that you want to get? Once you do that, then take a look at a gap analysis.
Well, and I think maybe, Eileen, you and I should work more together because I'm the intuitive type person. I love getting it to 80%. What are the possibilities? What are all the things we could do?
No, not me.
But it's getting to home that's really important, right? So the gap analysis, right? So we've done the assessment of our talent. Who's our talent? And I'll go through this quickly because I sort of touched on it before. Once you understand the look outside, what are we going to need? If we're going to turn into a global organization, what are the different skills and abilities that we need? If we're going to move from being a conventional oil and gas company to moving into the oil sands, what are the different skills that we're going to need? If the industry that we're working in is becoming deregulated, what are we going to need? If there's increasing competitive pressure on the work that we're doing, the environment that we're in, what are we going to need? There's always changing skill sets. Look outside, what are we going to need? Look inside, who do we have? What's our talent? We've assessed the talent. And then what are the gaps, right? So, and organizations rarely get to here. And that's 80%. That's the intuitive organization, right? We get to 80%, we do the assessment. When we talk about succession planning, people will sometimes do their succession planning process, typically on current roles, but they get to there, and they identify the gaps that the individuals have for moving into those CFO roles. But they rarely ask the question, so what are we gonna do about it? Right? How are we going to support? So we see for the CFO role, we've got these three people as potential successors. We see that these are their gaps, need this, need this, need this. But the key, the getting to home plate is, so how are we going to support it? Same thing, so my example was CFO, senior leaders. It's the same thing when you're looking at supply chain, right? It's the same sort of thinking. We have people in supply chain today that are focused on more transactional stuff. If we look to the future, we're going to need more strategic thinking. We're going to need more negotiation skills. So we see that there's a gap. What are we going to do about it? And that's when you get into starting different sorts of HR policies and working with your HR department to say, what can we do to train and develop and give the people that we have today the opportunity to develop the skills that we're going to need, right? What are we going to do in terms of bringing new people into the group? We need to look at the skills that we require today as well as the ones that we're going to need into the future, right? So that's where the gap analysis piece comes in. Identify the gaps and then do something about it. Here I've got a couple of examples of ways in which you can illustrate what some of the gaps are. So this would be a gap analysis for one particular job and the candidates for that. So the details aren't important, but just to give you an idea of if you're looking at replacing your most senior supply chain person or your manager of supply chain, and you've got a few internal candidates, you do the assessment of what's going to be required in this role. Not what did the last person do, but what's going to be required in the role. Who are our top candidates, and then how do they stack up against each other? That's the gap analysis. And then if we flip to the next slide, this is actually the slide that I was looking for before. This is an entire organization sort of illustration of a gap analysis, where you have different types of roles within the organization. You have people that are currently in those roles, and you have readiness ratings with regards to their readiness to move up inside the organization. So the idea being, from an organizational perspective, understand what you need, say it again, what you have, and then what are the gaps, and you want to make sure you're doing something about it. Training, development, moving people around so that they get those opportunities. On-the-job experience is one of the best ways to give people exposure and grow new skills, right? We know that. And we can illustrate it in lots of ways. From the employee perspective.
And from the employee, again, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, is you're responsible for your career, point blank. You need to be proactive, you need to take control of it. And part of that is looking at what's missing right now. So when you look outside within your organization, or look outside within the industry, what is it you need? What are some of the people doing now? What are some organizations they're part of? What are some of the training that they're getting? What's new on the marketplace that you need to learn about? Look to see what's out there. What do you have right now? So what kind of skills do you have right now? Again, and also the skills that you want to put out there, the ones things that you like to do. Take a hard look at that. There's a difference between skills and competencies. I can't tell you many times on resumes I've seen, I'm a really detailed person and I'm a hard worker, and everybody says that, like nobody cares, right? I want to know what you can do for me, right? That's true, I want to know what you can do for me, right? It's like when you job interview, our job is always to make our boss look good, right? And that's what someone is interviewing you for. I want to know how you're going to make me look good. So make sure you understand what you have right now, what your skills are, and what the things that you want to put out there are. Take a look at where the gaps are, as I mentioned earlier, and then what can I do about it? You create a development plan. You can work with your manager on doing that. You can work with your colleagues on how to do that. Or just work with yourself, a friend. But create a development plan. Take a look at where do I want to be in 2 years, 5 years? What do I want to have accomplished by then? And start benchmarking it. So, from an organizational perspective, one of the key, I didn't go into detail on the assess talent piece. There's a huge variety of ways that you can assess talent. There's obviously previous performance reviews, there's 360 feedback, individual assessments, but really one of the key ways or techniques that you're going to use to assess talent is having career discussions, right? This is going to give you a sense of who the person is, where they want to go. When we talk about succession planning, we talk about being ready, willing, and able. Because as you're getting that dashboard of who your talent is, you may see people that are ready, ready, willing, able. So able, they've got all the skills. They're ready to move on, but for a variety of different reasons, they're not willing, right? Family commitments, willingness to travel. There's a variety of different reasons that they may not be willing.
or they may not perceive themselves as ready. But one of the things that you want to do inside your organization is get your leaders and encourage your leaders and sometimes mandate your leaders, and as leaders do this, is have career discussions with the people that you work with. It's a dialogue. It's taking somebody out, buying them a coffee, and talking to them about where they want to go in their career, and then finding ways to support them, right? It's the simplest thing that an organization can do, is to get leaders to have those conversations fairly regularly with the staff to get an understanding of where they are, where they want to go, and set up a plan to help get them there. Now, Eileen's going to say, as an employee, you can't rely on your organization to do this. Absolutely. As an employer, you can't rely on your employee to do this, because organizations need to invest in their folks. And this is an inexpensive, go to Timmy's instead of Starbucks way of investing in people's career. So the goals of these conversations from an employer's perspective are, firstly, to understand. Understand the skills, competencies, aspirations, and motivations that the people that report to you have, right? Just see what they think. Because as we were talking about earlier, jobs will probably only tap into about 60% of what any individual has to offer. So as a leader, take the time to understand what's that other 30, 60%, who knows, right? But get that. And try to understand where they want to go and why they want to get there. And coach them, because they may not see the whole picture. You have a lot of great advice as leaders to provide these people with, right? So, and the goal isn't to tell. It's not to say, oh, you know what? You're great in this role. I think you should aim to go here, right? And a lot of leaders do that. I was going to make a gender comment, but we're probably safer in this room to not jump to those conclusions and start telling. But a lot of leaders tell. Your goal is not to tell, it's to understand. And to motivate employees, right? Why do employees leave organizations? Because of their boss. Most of the time because of boss. And in our engagement surveys and exit interview information, it's also because they don't see a career path, right? Those are the two big things. And that's usually because of the boss, right? Because in any organization, there's a career path. But when people don't see a path forward or even a next step, they leave, right? They can see it somewhere else, and so they'll leave the organization. So as leaders, you need to help them see that. So you want to motivate them to help them see that, and help them create a plan. You don't own the plan. It's their plan. You don't own it as a leader, but you need to support it. And then document it, right? So that it's clear, it's concrete, there's an agreement in terms of how you as a leader can help and what they're going to do in order to move forward. And then you get commitment and get people doing it. Next slide. So those are the goals. Understand, motivate, and plan, document. And then how you do that? Listen, right? It's pretty straightforward. Listen, ask questions, right? Don't make assumptions. Because sometimes you'll say, well, what's your next career move? Oh, well, I think I want to go to, I want to be a manager. Okay, why, right? Let's understand why you want to be a manager. Well, I want to make more money. Well, okay.
The wrong answer.
Or it seems like the next logical step. And then start asking some of those questions that Eileen talked about. Well, what do you love doing? What do you enjoy? Find that passion. And then help them think about where they're going to be able to find the passion in different parts of the organization. And that will be the best gift that you can give to any of your employees, is helping them find the next move where they can find passion. And come prepared. Be thoughtful. Look at their resume. Look at past performance reviews. Look at the org chart and see what sorts of things are out there. And also think of people that they can connect with and network with, and help them make those connections. And with that simple half-hour, 45-minute, hour-long coffee, you will probably have motivated and inspired an employee that will produce a whole lot more and have helped the organization, and they'll feel motivated, and people are much happier in their lives when they're happy and motivated at work.
Just something else to pick up on what Tanya was saying. I was thinking performance reviews. So who here has had a really thought out, comprehensive, detailed performance review? You know your manager has sat down and has given it like a good solid couple hours to really dig deep as to how is this person performing and how are we going to develop this person? Yeah, that's really good. I'm impressed there's that many.
I'm impressed that
most
there's
of
that
us
many.
have. I spent, like I said, 15 years in PR, and I think I had 7 employers, and I think I had 2 within the 7. And it doesn't count when you handed the performance review and they say, hey, you fill it out and let you know if I agree with it or not. So that's another thing that leaders can be doing, I think, very, very differently. It's performance reviews are a very essential part of anyone's development. Give it the time it deserves. It's not just great, it's performance review time, I have to do all of these. Make it a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. And I did spend some time in career transition as well, just as Eileen has. And it's amazing how many times you go into an office where somebody's going to be let go, a leader's going to be let go, and you talk to their manager and you say, so why? And they say, oh, well, they give you the reasons why. You say, okay, well, is this person aware of it? Are they going to be, first of all, are they going to be expecting this? And are they aware of the reasons that they're being let go? And the leader's always like, they should probably be expecting it. Yeah, I think it's been pretty obvious. Yeah.
No.
And you go in and you meet the person.
No.
And I'm like, I can't believe this. I got 4 out of 5 on my last performance review. I got full bonus. I got a letter of accommodation 6 weeks ago. What's going on? And so performance reviews and taking the opportunity to have those conversations to help, because people want to get better. It should never come as a surprise, and people genuinely want to do as well as they can in their jobs. I fundamentally believe that. And as leaders, we need to help them do that by giving them the good feedback and this negative supportive feedback, right? Here's how you need to be different.
So from the employee perspective, on those conversations, so prepare. What do you want to get out of this discussion? What's the main theme, the main goal? Maybe you just want to get your manager talking, right? Just, actually relate to them. A lot of us don't do that. Maybe we just want to get them talking, get some conversation going. But what do you want to get out of the discussion? What do you want to leave with? What is it? What feeling do you want? Again, I'm the sensory person. Everything's touch, feel, scent. I want to feel something out of it. What kind of questions would you have for your employer? Ask a lot of open-ended questions. Like, develop them in advance. Ask them. Don't ask yes or no questions. A lot of them start with what, how. Sometimes why. It depends. They can be confrontational, but try to open up with a lot of how and what questions, and it'll get conversation going. Listen very carefully. In coaching, we have 3 levels of listening, and one of them is listening how it affects you. Listening is then also level 2 is how it affects the other person. What is the other person saying? Stay in that level 2. It is about you, but why do you think that person is saying what they're saying? Get an idea of where it's coming from. And then what do you want to take away from this? What's the follow-up? Come to an agreement with your supervisor as to how we're going to continue this conversation. What are some of the benchmarks? Are we going to revisit this in next quarter, next week? Where do you want to go with this? Make sure there's an agreement there. Both of you have come to agreement. Ask them how they think they want to continue it, and then throw some ideas out on your own. Don't let them have all the answers. You come with answers too. You come with suggestions. You can be accommodating, be understanding, but get them talking. Try to understand where they're coming from and their perspective is. Questions and answers. That would conclude
So
our
I think we've
presentation.
got about time for 2 questions.
We're out of time.
Because there's a delicious lunch waiting out
Yes.
there for you guys.
We're out of time.
So can we start with this lady here?
I got one question for each of you real quick. Just what is One of the things that came out of the conversation yesterday, and it was implied, and I think it's a really common one, it's on the employee side of it, where women have a tendency to probably be able to move up, but don't have the confidence, so will reluctantly allow themselves to be moved into that area. So how would you recommend women find that confidence to take the initiative and not be afraid to take that leap? The conversation from the employer is one thing, but if they don't engage, they're never going to get that out. And the second question is, what happens when the role isn't available, but the person is? What do you do with them then?
Okay.
One for each, yeah.
Perfect. Do you want to handle the
Sure.
confidence?
So as far as confidence is concerned, yes. There's a reason women are paid less in business. They ask for less. You don't ask, you don't get, right? And they do. They come down to they tend to come down. It's been proven over and over again of, okay, why? No, I gotta compromise on this and compromise. I don't compromise on anything. No one's asking you to compromise. As far as gaining confidence is concerned, well, that is, there's ways to gain confidence. You can do it through coaching, you can do it through some self-assessments. Part of what helps with confidence is actually laying it out right in front of you in writing around your computer. Okay, what are my successes? What are my accomplishments? Do a lot of us on resumes just have, here's a laundry list of all the things I've done? Start writing a list of accomplishments. Start thinking about what did I accomplish. There's one thing about what I was hired to do. That's your responsibility. I'm not as interested in that. I'm interested in what you accomplished. And then link it up with some skills. And you can actually see it right there. Wow, I've been here for 3 years, and look at all the stuff I've done. And do that on a regular basis. It's like, does everyone here update their resume every year? No? Okay, yeah, and you should. And, and it's true, because when you have to start doing that, and then you got to take stock of the last 5 or 10 years, that's really hard to do. So that's one way to do it, and I've suggested on that numerous occasions. Just have it right in front of you, like how have I accomplished, what have I accomplished, and how did I get there? And then go in there with what you want. And like I said, I have to say, men are really good at saying, show me the money. They don't, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in job interviews where I've had to say, well, I'd like 60,000, but that's negotiable, which means I'll settle for less, right? Don't go there. Don't go there. Does that answer your question? I'll give you a personal example. I went into coaching. I took one course and said I'm a coach. I took all the other ones after, but I didn't wait until I had everything and then my accreditation and all that. I just hung out my shingle saying I'm a coach. No one ever asked me how long I've been doing it for, or if I have any credential whatsoever. I just took one course and I took the rest.
We could talk about gender
never
issues forever. I did my
Yeah.
PhD dissertation on gender differences in terms
Yeah.
of perceptions of entitlement. But one of the most interesting things that I found in all of the research that I did was around negotiations. So almost a little technique that I've encouraged women to do is do exactly as Eileen said. Look at your accomplishments and then put on a different hat. Because in negotiations, lots of research shows men are far better at negotiating for themselves than are women. But do you know what? Women are far better at negotiating for others than are men. So a tactic that I've encouraged women to do is create that resume, your list of achievements, and then look at it as if it's another person. And then go in and negotiate as if it's somebody else, as if it's a respected colleague, as if it's your sister or somebody else. And the hat that you wear and the techniques that you use will be very different than if you're trying to negotiate for yourself. I suspect that we won't have time to answer your question, but my short answer to that is talk to them about the readiness. So the person that's ready but the job's not there, acknowledge it, and special projects. Find stuff for them to do. Keep them engaged.
I'm hanging around for lunch, so I'm happy to chat with anybody.
We'll answer
That's
questions.
right. In the hopes of me helping negotiate for the rest of you for some lunchtime, we'll have to call it there. And as I said, they'll be around to ask some more questions. So let's thank them for the great presentation.